Hello everyone, welcome back to learnerslesson.com. So today we are going to learn about Java data types. So what are data types? And by definition, data types tells a variable what kind of values it can contain. So let us see with a very easy example. As we have seen, in case of variables, we have declared int x. So that was a variable declaration. And what happened was an empty location was created and that was named as x. And then we have initialized an integer value to it. And what happened is 3 would have gone and set inside x. Now, let us say we are going to insert a decimal value inside it. Let us suppose the decimal value is 3.5. And what we can see is this 3.5 is not exactly fitting inside x. That means that it is not possible as the variable of int type cannot hold a decimal value. So we have declared the variable for holding only an integer and not for holding a decimal value. And the decimal value we can see is not fitting inside the x variable. So what we can do is we can change it to float. That is, instead of int, we are writing it as float x. And what happened is x would get a larger space in order to store 3.5. So again, we are trying to store 3.5 inside x, and there is also an f symbol. So that does mean that this is a floating point number. So for a decimal number, what we can write is after 3.5, we have to write f. Now what happens is 3.5 goes and sits inside x, and now we can see that it's actually fitting inside x because we have changed the int to float. So now it is allowed as a float type can hold decimal values. Similarly, if we want to hold a letter, that is, say there can be a scenario wherein you have to store either the result is a yes, for yes you need to store a y, or if the result is a no, you need to store a n inside a variable. So in that case, we have something called as char. So char tells the variable x that it is going to hold a letter. So let us initialize y to x. So what happens is y goes and sits inside the variable x. And just keep in mind that if you are assigning a letter to a variable, then you have to put quotes. So char data types can hold a letter or a character. Now what we have analyzed that the variable x can hold an integer, and when it's holding an integer we are writing it with int x, and in that case the variable x is holding an integer. Similarly, if it's going to hold a decimal value, we are mentioning it with float then x. And similarly in this case, what we can see is we are writing it with char, and it is going to hold a letter. So just before the variable, we are writing something, and that is determining what kind of value this variable is going to hold. And this is nothing but a data type. Just like int, char, float are all data types. So let us see the classification of data type. So it can be classified into two ways. One is a primitive data types and the next one is an object data types. So let us see primitive data types first. Now primitive data types can be divided into 4 categories. One is integer, which we have already seen, but we will be seeing more of it. This integer category is going to hold a few integers like 3, 4, 26, 19, something like that. Similarly, floating point, we have already seen float, float is going to hold a decimal value. Similarly, Boolean is going to store either a true or a false, and character is going to store a letter. Even that is something what we have seen. Now let us see in detail what is an integer or a floating point, and also Boolean, how Boolean is going to hold a true or false, and also how can we store a letter in a character data type. First, let us see how many data types are there in the integer category. So there are 4: byte, short, int and long. If you are going to store a very small number inside a variable, you can use byte. And if you are going to store a little bigger number, you can use short. If you're going to store a medium-sized number, you can store it inside int, and long is used for very large numbers. So why are these things for? Let us suppose you're going outside. You have a water bottle which can hold 1 liter of water. it's sufficient for you and it's easier for you to carry. So you are not going to take a 20-liter can. Even the same thing applies here. If you need a small number, so you can just save some space and you can mention it with byte. Similar thing applies for int or long or short. Floating point we have, and there are two subcategories, that is float and double. So again, float is going to store a medium-sized decimal value and double is going to store a large-sized decimal value. Similarly, Boolean is just going to store either a true or a false, and char is going to store a letter. So let us see the integer data type in detail. What we have seen is byte. Byte is going to store a very small value and its size is 1 byte or 8 bits. Let us not bother about 1 byte or bits. So let us look at the range. Byte can only store a value in between -128 to 127. Similarly, short is going to store a value within the range -32768 to 32767, and if you need a larger value you can use int, which has this particular range -214 blah 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 to 2147483647. And if you want to store a very long number, you can use long. So let us see the example. In the previous case, you have seen how we have declared a variable using intx. In this case, we are just changing the data type to byte because we just need a very small number, that is 24. And if you see in the left hand side, byte can hold the number 24 as its ranges in between -128 to 127. So let us see what is the output. And we can see the output is 24. The value is 24. Now let us increase this number a little bit. So let us change it to 128, and if you see in the left hand side, the range is only till 127. So let us see what happens. And as we can see, it has given an error, that is incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from int to byte. What it's trying to say is you cannot store 128 into a byte type because its range is more. So what you can do is you can store it inside an integer or short or long. So let us see an example with short. So even in case of short, what we have done is short x equals 32767, and if you see on the left hand side, it's already in the range because its last range is, the last value in its range is 32767, and if we see, the output is already printed on the screen. Similarly, let us see an example with the integer variable. So we have initialized this particular value, and if you check on the left hand side for the range of int, we can see it's matching, and as we can see, the value is also printed. Similar case happens for long. We have taken a very long value, and if you remember that in case of float we have given a f symbol, we are doing the same thing over here. We are just putting a l symbol after long, which is telling this value is a very long value. Now if you run this program, we get an output of this type, but that L is not printed, just the value is printed. Now let us see the floating point data types. We have already seen float. So float has this particular range of 140 something into 10 to the power -45 to 3.40 something into 10 to the power 38. So this is a very long range, and even double has a larger range. So let us see an example with float. So what we have done is float x equals to 24.5 f. Now if we try to run this program, we get the output as the value is 24.5. Again, let us see an example with double. So we have initialized the double variable with 2476.532, and the great thing to note is we don't have to mention any d after this. It prints just fine. The value is 2476.532. Also, let us see about Boolean data types. So the Boolean data type can have two values, either true or a false. So let us see an example. Boolean x equals true, and what we can see is the output becomes the value is true. Also, let us check it with false. What happens if we initialize x with false? The same thing happens. The value is false. Let us see the character data types again. Character data types can only store letters, and the letters should be placed inside quotes. So let us see an example. Char x equals a, and that should be inside quotes. Now if we see the output becomes the value is A. So let us see a quick example in IntelliJ IDEA. I'll only be showing with just a single variable, and let us see how it works. So we do have this example, but we won't be making it so complex. We will only be declaring a variable and displaying the result. So as we can see that I have given a very large value inside X, which is of integer data types, and IntelliJ is already telling integer number is too large. But let us go ahead and run it. So as we can see here, the error is integer number too large. So let us change it and give it a value which is a little less, and let us rerun it again. And as we can see, we got this result as 1, 2, 3, 4. And lastly, we have the other classification of data types, which is object data types. Object data types are such kind of data types which are custom defined and are actually created by the developers. So we don't have to bother this for now. When we will be learning about classes and objects, we will be learning more about it. So that was all about variables. And in the next tutorial, we are going to learn about strings, because so far we have learned how to store a number, how to store a decimal point. We have also learned how to store a letter. But what about a group of letters or a name, maybe John, Paul, Andrews? How to store that? And that is when string comes into picture. We will be learning more about strings in the next tutorial. Till then, take care and goodbye. Thanks for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe if you love this video, and see you on the next tutorial. Thank you so much.